the discussion around food is more often framed in terms of food sovereignty, meaning that people as a human right, regardless of where they are entitled not only to sufficient food to meet their nutrient requirements or their daily needs, and I would call that food security, but they're also entitled to have food that meets their social and cultural, religious, and ceremonial purposes, that reflects their knowledge systems and their worldviews. Another way in which I think about food, the food issue, is in terms of my work with the American Indian Program. I am Tuscarora, which is one of the Six Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy, also known as Haudenosaunee. And issues of food are very important in indigenous communities throughout North America, but worldwide as well. Also in the United States, many native indigenous communities are really suffering from very high levels of diseases that are related to diet. And of course, those diet-related diseases are a direct result of colonization in North America, which kind of brutally deprived many native communities of their not only their land and traditional means of lifestyles, that deprived them of their languages. I mean, actually, many people, millions of people, lost their lives. And the situation that we're faced with today, particularly in the United States and Canada, is that many indigenous communities are really struggling not only to get sufficient food, because a lot of the foods they have access to are nutritionally not sound. Many Indian communities live in what we would call food deserts. They don't have access to a variety of fresh and healthy foods. And oftentimes they're foods that really trigger or contribute to the very high levels of diabetes, cardiovascular, disease problems that are seen in these areas. So figuring out ways to deal with that is not just about food or growing food. It addresses a much larger framework. It's a very systemic problem that requires a much larger scope, a larger lens when you look at, well, what exactly is the problem? And in many places in the world, food production in indigenous communities is very different than it is in Western countries. And food has much more meaning to people than just fuel or something to sell or something to buy. It's very much integrated into life at all levels, from ceremonial and spiritual, intergenerational. It has very profound meanings that go beyond what many people in the United States, Western Europe, more developed countries think about when they consider food. So the food sovereignty issue is part of food, access, security, but it has a much larger meaning. Well, I'm an agricultural scientist, a soil scientist by training. Actually, I like to call myself an agronomist. I'm interested in soils in terms of their ability to support crops, and particularly field crops and food crops. I am very interested in food security from a number of different aspects, both in how we use our natural resources most efficiently and carefully and in a sustainable way so that we can continue to feed people. But I'm also interested in food security in terms of looking at the system as a whole and figuring out ways that we can reduce waste and increase accessibility of food to people in all areas. Another area that I'm very concerned with in terms of food access to food and food sufficiency for everyone is choices about how we eat. And I'm also a member of the Food Focus team here at Cornell, and we're addressing issues of what does a sustainable food system look like, and in particular, how can we make sure that not only Cornell students are eating well and thinking about environmental impacts, but also thinking about our global responsibilities. And one of the things that comes up immediately is meat consumption, and thinking about the ways in which we might design food systems that that maximize food, availability, that everyone gets food, and at the same time meets the needs of particular groups. And so lots of people will either come to the discussion saying that, well, of course we have to have meat, or of course no one should eat meat. And I think the answer to that is much more complicated. But I absolutely believe that in order to have food security for a global population, people in the United States and in Western Europe must dramatically reduce the amounts of meat that we consume per capita per year. And so there's plenty of meat for everyone to have, but we really have to have a view on if people in the United States insist on eating 200 pounds per capita per year, that means many people in the rest of the world will have none. And it's very true that meat is an extremely high quality food, and that we should be sharing it appropriately and in ways that are fair.